Okay, everybody, I just wanted to show you something real quick. So I'm suggesting that you'll be in a better place if you sketch out a mock-up of any charts you want to make before you actually make them. And sometimes when I suggest this to people, they feel like, I don't know where to even get started. So I made a little tool to help you do that. So you can go up here to this address up at the top, and I'll put this in the module, so don't worry about copying that down. Go to this website here, it'll create a tool that will try to make the chart for you, or at least as easy as it can be. That, I think, is the thing. We usually have some idea of what kind of chart we're interested in making. So we'll just focus on the most basic aspects of the visual pieces, and we can add in more complexity as we go along. So what happens when we get here? Well, we've got off to the left side here a bunch of different options. We'll talk about those in a second. But really I want to focus on the right side here, which just has two big black squares on a gray background. This is based on ggplot. So the idea here is, what if we wanted to create our own chart? And so we can click right directly on the graph, and wherever we click, as we click high, we'll get a higher bar. If we click low, we'll get a lower bar. We can do it for either of the two bars on the chart. And that is the point, to say that maybe it's hard to figure out what exactly kind of chart you want to make, but you probably have some broad idea of what-ish the chart might look like. So let's start there, and we can add more details as we go along. So let's say that you're performing an experimental design. An experimental design means that we're flipping a coin to say who gets which treatment, and then we know that it's going to be a meaningful comparison, because if we can say that the only difference between groups is the flip of a coin, then any difference we see in the outcome is directly attributable to the treatment itself. So if that's happening, what might we see? Well, maybe let's say the left bar is the control group, so they just get a neutral placebo. So whatever your outcome is, we'd expect them that it's probably going to be a low level. Compared to the right side, it's going to be your treatment group. So in this case, we'll click the bar to be a little bit higher, implying that it's going to be a better outcome. That's the idea. We can create this chart easily in our mind and just click to make it the way we want it. Of course, the real value here is to say, well, what if we want to get a little bit more detailed than that? Right now, we just have two bars that are labeled 1 and 2. We can scroll down here, bar 1 name. Okay, we're going to kind of call this placebo. So we'll just type that into the little box. Bar 1 name is placebo. And if we look off to the right here next to it, it now says placebo. And bar 2 name, we're going to call experimental, because this might be our experimental condition. Notice that these bars are both black, and the squares next to the words placebo and experimental are also both black. Maybe we want to give some color. Bar 1 color is one of the inputs down on the left side here. Bar 1 color is currently set to black. So let's make it red. And then we'll have bar 2 color right below that. Bar 2 color currently set to black. Let's scroll down a little, and maybe we can select blue. There's all kinds of different colors you could choose here. That's the whole point, is to say, let's make a chart easy and intuitive. So now we see placebo is the bar in red on the left, has a low level of the outcome. Then experimental group is the bar on the right, has a high level of the outcome. Easy peasy. You didn't have to get out any coloring markers or crayons or whatever. You can do this right on your own. Another thing we might want to think about is, well, what is the outcome? Maybe we've got two bars here for experimental group and placebo group, but what's the outcome we're talking about? And so we got some options on the left side here. So let's go down to this one here that says y-axis label. We can type in a label here. Let's say that we're looking at patients with tuberculosis. We want to see how many of them are successfully treated. So I'll write treated percent in this little box here, and notice what happens on the y-axis. It says treated percent. So how many people successfully clear their tuberculosis infection? And so that's what we're thinking, that our placebo group is going to be a low percent because it's not really helping. They're not actually getting any treatment. And our experimental group is going to be a lot higher because we think more people are going to actually be treated. Another reason that I like this is because then we can start thinking in details. Sure, the basic outline of this chart is intuitive enough, but we might ask ourselves, well, how many people can we really expect to be treated? So we got an option here for minimum value and maximum value. And we could scale this to 0% as the minimum value and 100 as the maximum value. So just typing in on the left side here, minimum value of 0, maximum value of 100, and it'll add an axis labels onto our chart. So now the chart goes from 0 to 100% on the left side. And this is why it's helpful, because we might ask ourselves, where we click these bars originally implies that, maybe 20% of people on the placebo are successfully clearing the infection. Whereas maybe 80-90% of people on the experimental group are clearing the infection. And that's great. We like that. But realistically, you got to ask yourself, really going to successfully treat 80-90% of people? Maybe we should draw our bar a little lower. Maybe it's closer to 50%. It's still good. It's better than the placebo where we're at 20%, but it's a more realistic expectation. And that's the whole point. When you're drawing the chart in advance, that gives you the opportunity to think through these logistics. And maybe the outline of this chart is the same. Maybe we're still going from, a small bar to a large bar. But now we can think about, what do we really expect to see? How big of a difference? Maybe if we expect that not many people are going to be successfully treated on the placebo and only a little bit of people are going to be successfully treated in the experimental arm, this would be something that would be really insightful. Because I would tell you, you need a really big sample size. If you're only seeing, 5% of people being treated versus 10%, that's not a big difference. Compared to if you think it's 5% versus, 75%, you'd say, yeah, we should be okay even if we don't have a big sample size. These are the details. And that's the whole point of this tool, is to say, oftentimes it's easy to say, yep, we know the outline of the chart looks like, whatever high and low values we want to see. But then let's think about the details. And it's hard to think about those details all at once. This allows you to add the details in slowly. Let's do one more example real quick. So right now we just have 2 bars, but on the left side, the top option is how many bars would you like? Well, we can edit this. We can make it into 4 bars, and it's going to reset a bunch of these settings. I'm going to delete the minimum value on the left side and the maximum value on the left side because we're not going to think about that quite yet. And we'll delete this axis label treated. Now we've got 4 bars, so just 4 black bars in the middle of the screen here. And we might like to think about, what if this is an observational study? So an observational study, we know that people aren't randomly getting their treatments, but we still want to compare how they do on different treatments. And so if that's the case, one way to implement an observational study is to have a longitudinal component. If you wanted to look at, how do people do at baseline, and then how do they do 6 months after treatment, and you can say even if people aren't the same health situation at baseline, we might still see better improvements at follow-up for one treatment or another. So you might suggest then that the increase in health status from baseline to follow-up supports which treatment is better. That's the idea. That's why we have 4 bars. Maybe we'll make these left 2. These might represent our treatment 1. And these right 2 might represent our treatment 2. And the bar on the left side of each pair might represent a pre-value. And the bar on the right side of each pair might represent a post-value, after 6 months of after the treatment or something like that. Of course, this is all very abstract. Let's get some labels going. So we got 4 bars. So maybe our first bar is treatment 1 pre, because this represents the first treatment option, but it's people at a pre-period. And bar 2 name on the left side here, we'll edit this, we'll call this treatment 1 post. Yeah, same idea, people who are receiving the same treatment, but let's look at them 6 months later at a post period. Bar 3 name, just going down the left side here, maybe we'll call this treatment 2 pre. There we are, okay. Typography. Anyway, so if we have treatment 2 pre, this is going to give us an assessment of how people are doing at the pre-period, but for people who are on a different treatment plan. And bar 4 name we'll call treatment 2 post. So people are on that same treatment, but 6 months later. And the reason we'd want to do this is now we have a lot of meaningful information we can compare. Right now, these are all set to be black bars, but let's change the colors around so that we can compare them. Maybe we'll make treatment 1 have like cool colors. So we'll make the first bar for treatment 1 pre. We're going to go to bar 1 color and make it a blue color first, and then bar 2 color. So the second bar representing treatment 1 at post, keeping it cool colors. So maybe we'll do green here. And then we'll have, for bar 3 color down below, this is going to be treatment 1 at pre. Maybe we'll do warm colors for this one, so let's do this one in yellow. And then we'll do bar 4 color. So this is treatment 2 at the post period. We can scroll down a little and select red from the list. Now we have 4 different color-coded bars, and we can tell which is which treatment and whether it's pre or post. And that's the whole point, is to try to help us think through this problem. This is just an organizational tool. And so what do we think is going to happen? Well, maybe we think that people who are on treatment 1 are people who are usually doing okay. So their health outcomes aren't too bad. So maybe we'll make this pre-value a little bit higher. And that's the whole point here, to say maybe we think that there is a difference in who's receiving which treatment, and it has to do with their underlying health status. And for treatment 2 pre, the yellow bar, the third bar in, maybe we expect them to have a really low, so they don't have as good health outcomes. That's the whole point, that maybe they aren't really comparable groups at pre. And that's something that we want to think about while we're planning our project to make sure we collect the data that we need. Now we'll talk about treatment 1 at post, the green bar, the second one in. So we think the treatment helps, but maybe it just helps a little bit. So we'll click that bar to be a little bit higher. And that's the point, to say that, yeah, maybe it's helping, but only helping so much. And then lastly, we'll look at treatment 2 post in red. And this is really important. The question is, how much better can people be? Maybe we find that on treatment 2, they get about as healthy as people on treatment 1. However, keep in mind, they started out really low. So doing equally well at post between the 2 treatments is actually quite remarkable, as all the people on treatment 2 are in really bad health condition, but they're winding up about okay as people who are on treatment 1. That's the whole point here, is trying to think out the logistics of the chart you're making. So now we can know what data we're expecting, which comparisons are we interested in. If we just looked at the post value between treatment 1 and treatment 2, they wouldn't be that different. So we wouldn't really say any treatment is better. But when we account for where they started between treatment 1 and treatment 2, the first and third bars, we say, gosh, people on treatment 2 got a lot healthier. They're doing way better now. So we'd say clearly treatment 2 is quite effective, especially for people who are in a poor health condition originally. Whereas in treatment 1, it helped a little bit, but only so much. Of course, then we can come up with some charts. We can label the y-axis. Maybe if we have this as, health rating. If we ask if we ask providers to rate people from 1 to 10 on how they're doing. 1, 2, 10. And then our minimum value would be 1. And our maximum value would be 10. So these are all inputs on the left side that help us figure this out. Now I'll scale it to this. So in other words, this chart is implying that at the beginning, most people on treatment 1 are about like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. And they get up to like about a 7 or 8 out of 10. Whereas most people on treatment 2 start out at like, a 2 or 3 out of 10. But then they also get up to about a 7 or 8 out of 10. And that's the whole point. You'd think about what your outcome is and to say what's plausible. Is it really that people are going to be starting out at 6 or 7 out of 10? Maybe we should inch these bars down initially and say, yeah, maybe they can get up to about a 5, but they're probably starting out at a 2 or 3 no matter what. That's the whole point here. This will help you think through your project because all these details are going to be really important in collecting data and planning out how large of a sample size you need, how you should collect data, whether or not you have enough data to really answer your question. And it's hard to think about that up front. But as you add details to the chart, you'll naturally start asking yourself, is this plausible? What's really my hypothesis? How large are the differences going to be? It still looks like, treatment 1 is a smaller benefit than treatment 2 is, but if this is the reality, it's not such a huge jump as you might have expected to see originally. And that's going to be important because if it's only a modest improvement, then you'd want a larger sample size. These are all the logistics that this is designed to help you think through. All right, that's all I got for today. This is just a tool to help you if you're struggling with thinking about how to make a mock-up chart, just something to help you work that out. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.